September of 2023, this month, celebrates my 15th year being with my husband, Isaac. We were married in 2010, so next month, October 13th, is our 13th wedding anniversary. And 15 years is an amazing amount of time to be with anybody. I wanted to take this opportunity to share a story out of my book, When We Die, We Come Up for Air. This is a collection of 7 short stories of my experiences and 77 poems that I wrote. But the story that I'd like to share with everybody here is called Corn. So please sit back, relax, and you'll see why I'm sharing it. I blurted out the only word I could think of: corn. I stood a distance from him, perhaps intimidated by him, perhaps intimidated by his smile. Whatever the case, I was a fair distance from him, and he couldn't hear me. The sound of the market murmured around us, his smile so bright it made me squint. He kept on smiling. "Good morning," he exclaimed. How could a smile like that get brighter? "No," I said stiffly. What the hell was my problem? "I'm looking for corn." It was the scariest sentence I'd ever said in my life. He stood in his ragged corduroys and his baggy t-shirt, a bandana tied around his long hair keeping the curls out of his face. He wore long, curvy earrings through both ears, standing behind a simple table at the farmer's market. No pop-up tent, nothing but a small table in front of him, a small selection of vegetables on that small table, and that goddamned smile. That goddamned smile. And no corn, of course. The scant selection of vegetables on that small table was sparse, and it was easy to see that he had no corn. But I had to talk to him, and I couldn't, just walk up and talk to him like a normal human being. That was absolutely out of the question. If I wasn't keeping things awkward, I wasn't staying on brand. And I needed corn. I was legitimately looking for corn for the weekend, as I wanted to make some for my son Sequoia, since he was going to be with me that weekend. He was about 5 years old, and his mother and I had been separated a couple of years at this point, sharing time with him fairly and amicably. I was working at a small cell phone store just down the street from the farmer's market, and Shelley, the woman I worked with, would take turns visiting the market with me on Saturdays. I would visit the market while she watched the store, getting stuff for my weekend, and she would do the same. Shelley turned me on to the farmer's market, always coming back with heaping bags of produce for a tiny bit of money. We spent the summer going every Saturday, heading down street on our breaks. Now I found myself trying to feed 2 birds with one seed: get some of the corn I was looking for and get Shelley off my back. She was encouraging me to find the courage to speak to the person I'd fallen in love with. I know it sounds strange, the idea of falling in love with someone without ever speaking to them, but it happened to me. I imagine people fall in love with other people all the time: tellers at the bank and clerks at the gas station, never having the chance to speak with them outside of polite pleasantries, or getting the chance to ask them for corn. I'd faithfully visited the farmers market every Saturday, loving the idea of supporting the local farmers and producers in our area. I soon found out that it was much more than that. There were artists, musicians, meat producers, and so many more wonderful people that made up the market. A lush rolling green centered around a quaint gazebo, the market was usually a resplendent display of pop-up tents and people milling about. So when someone showed up without a tent, with a simple table, he stood out. Even with a pop-up tent, he would have stood out. I felt an ocean when I saw him. Later, I would wonder if the universe heard my prayers. How do you describe the moment the universe gives you what you prayed for? There were no angel trumpets, no heavenly choruses erupting from the sky. For myself, there was only the simple sound of an awkward question. Corn? As a 29-year-old man, that was the most difficult word I'd ever said. How could one word cause my painful, mundane world to come crashing down around me? On the other side of this world was going to be a magical world of love and wonder, the likes of which I would never imagine. As a small child, my earliest memories of being me included my love of the weird and unusual. Notoriously, I was the child who buried his nose in Stephen King novels at the age of 7, and while this love of the strange and unusual was part of me, as was the knowledge that I was gay and that I liked boys instead of girls. Intrinsically tied into that knowing was also the knowing that liking boys was quote unquote bad, both to the people and to the world around me. I grew up deeply situated in the woods of northern New England and deep in the closet. I came out of the closet slowly after my son's mother and I separated, after which I endured a couple of years of terrible relationships. These relationships were traumatic in their own way. Books could be written and have been written around the perils of homosexuality, coming out of the closet, identity, and of the complexities of relationships in general. I can only sum it up to say that I picked up some bumps and bruises along the way that taught me a lot about who I was and what I wanted in romantic partners. I knew at that time in my life that I didn't want a relationship. I didn't think having a relationship as a homosexual, having a relationship of mutual respect, trust, and love was possible. I'd been put through the ringer so badly on a couple of occasions that I no longer had any desire to be left hung out to dry anymore. While I mulled around the market, I mulled through my trauma. I had all but given up. But I can remember my Hail Mary. I can remember the prayer I sent out to the universe. I'll be fair to myself and I'll honor the idea of love in general by acknowledging that yes, I truly wanted love in my life, that I truly wanted a partner. I was simply having a hard time finding one, and I know that's a plight many humans suffer through. So I prayed. I can't remember exactly where I was or what caused me to tune into the great gig in the sky directly, but at this point I had zero spirituality, zero relationship with spirit or God or the unseen in any way. If I did have any sort of relationship, it was a hostile one, having been told by many people and organizations that simply being born the way I was an abomination. But I prayed and it went something like this. Hey, universe. Hey, God. If you're there, it's me. As you can see, I've suffered through some stuff and I don't really think that having a relationship is a thing for me. I know you don't hate me or hate people like me, but it's hard. And if you're there, if there's any chance you'd want me to be happy, please send me someone who doesn't mind getting dirty. Send me a grease monkey. Send me a mechanic. Send me a farmer. I didn't really fit into the limited bit of gay culture I had access to at that time. I had spent my life up to that point playing straight and having all sorts of jobs, many of which would be considered manly. I didn't fit any sort of mold or archetype of what a gay or a straight man should be, and I found myself unable to fit in with anyone around me. Never mind having a relationship with anyone. I gave up and I threw in the towel, but when I prayed on the tiny chance that happiness could exist for me anywhere in the future, I figured asking for someone who didn't mind getting dirty would be on the far opposite end of the spectrum from whom I was seeing up to that point. A gay mechanic? A gay farmer in northern New Hampshire or Vermont? You gotta be kidding me. That had to be as impossible as a healthy, functioning relationship itself. I was hopeless, or perhaps it's better to say I had 0.00001% hope that happiness could be mine or that I could be anyone's happiness. I said my Hail Mary just in case anyone was listening, then I went about my business of being alone. A few weeks later, a new vendor showed up at the farmer's market. He took my breath away. Every synapse, every network of everything I had ever been suddenly felt right and correct, along with being out of control and barely able to function appropriately. Simply being in a person's presence like this, like I'd never felt or experienced before, was something I didn't realize I needed to become accustomed to. Don't deep sea divers have to come up to the surface slowly? How does one acclimate to the sun when they've spent their entire life underground? Every Saturday, I would venture to the farmer's market, doing my best not to run, simply to see if this strange elven prince was there with his small table and his limited offerings. I made sure to wear sunglasses so he wouldn't see me stealing glances his way. Eventually, after weeks of working up the courage, after weeks of being encouraged by Shelley, I found the strength to ask this walking miracle for corn. How many times did I interact with him before making my way slowly close to him, before finally exchanging names, and then eventually exchanging numbers? The shortest eternity, surely. How strange that this person, this human who absolutely bedazzled me from a distance, also lived in the same town that I lived in. How strange that this person had lived only a 4-minute drive all his life from the house I grew up in. How strange that I helped my father build the chimney in his grandfather's house. How strange that my sister worked with his father that he also had mutual friends of mine that he grew up with. How strange that we had never met until that very autumn. How strange indeed. We exchanged numbers, we exchanged texts. He rented movies from the local general store, bringing them over, neither of us knowing if the other was interested in the other one in that way. Eventually, I invited him on what would be considered our first date to a local healing spring sacred to the indigenous people of our area. This place, a place of healing and horror, had been part of my life since I was a child and was a sacred place to me as well, though no one really knew that about me at this point in my life. I had no one to share that with up to that point, so why did I think it was appropriate to bring this person, who I knew very little about, to such a sacred place the first time I spent time with him? I'll never know, and while I say that, I understand that we can hold onto a knowing that's so deep we won't fully understand it. Spending time with him, even in my most special sacred places, made as much sense as the sun coming up and the snow coming down. Knowing him, spending time with him, and coming to love him all make as much sense as breathing, and is as much a gift as well, an honor. Life is by no means a fairy tale, no matter what we're taught as young children. Reality is far more complex than simple fables, yet here I was, a person who was laid so low as to become almost completely hopeless. I prayed, and while I won't claim the universe is in the business of answering prayers, it certainly answered mine. We would come to live together, this walking miracle and me, spending many summers in our early years working the farmer's market together, our lives turning towards greatness with every season. The universe, it seems, was far more capable of answering prayers than I once gave it credit for. Isaac and I would elope on an October afternoon, each of us holding white flowers, excited for what lay ahead. Thank you for listening. And Isaac, I love you.